Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite genres of books, which is adventure books. I feel like I go on and on about adventure books all the time because I love them so much and I'm constantly looking for more of them. And what I really want is like adventure books for adults. And if it's like historical fiction or fantasy, or if it has some whimsy to it, that's great. If they're going on a quest or something, that's great. There's like darker stuff and secrets and things like that, also great as long as there is like a solid adventure element in it. I think what I like so much about these kinds of books is that they are very entertaining and usually quite easy to get lost in. And I do think a part of my taste has been influenced by the kinds of movies and stuff that I liked when I was growing up, and I still like, I guess, which is sort of like action adventure or just adventure. But when I'm reading, I don't want it to be too modern. I don't think like I don't want to read a modern action book. I'm not interested in a car chase. Like, that's not where it's at for me. It's more about like a journey and a quest, if that makes sense. I don't really know if I'm making a lot of sense, but I feel like with this stack of books that I'm going to show you, you'll get what I mean. So let's just get into it, starting with the wonderful Empire of Shadows by Jacquelyn Benson. This is a mix of historical fiction, fantasy, adventure, and romance, so there's a lot going on in here. It's set in Victorian times where we meet our main character who comes across a map to an ancient lost city, and she realizes that this find is like huge and she wants to go find this city. But there is also, of course, a ruthless villain who knows about this map and who wants this map and will stop at nothing to get it. It ends up becoming a sort of race for who can get there first, and so our main character sets off to Central America to try and find this place, but she's just like a random British woman, really, and even though she's very intelligent and resourceful, she's never been out in the jungle before, so she needs some help. And eventually, she sort of recruits this maverick surveyor guy who loves running around with his machete, and even though he's kind of ridiculous, he is actually quite helpful, and so off they go into the jungle to try and find this lost city. This book is just so much fun. It is a little bit over the top and a little ridiculous, but I feel like it suits the story really well. And I really like the historical setting in here, all of the different settings that we get to see. I love the characters and this whole mystery. There's also some like arcane stuff, magical stuff going on, which is quite interesting. And it's just so entertaining. Like, it's just so much fun. And I think I say this every time I mention this book, but if you like the movie The Mummy, this is the closest book that I've found with the same vibe. And I love that movie. Like, it's one of my favorites. There is also a sequel to this. I think it's called Son of the Tomb King or something like that. And then also a third book, Arrow of Fortune. I don't have any of these yet, but I'm desperate to get my hands on them because I think, like, if they're anything like this first book, it's going to be so much fun to read. Secondly, we have The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty, and this is another one of my favorites. It's historical fiction, fantasy, adventure, following a retired pirate who has had quite a notorious career as a pirate, and now she's living a much more peaceful life, but then that peace is disrupted when someone comes to her with a quest, I guess, and they will pay her a lot of money if she can do what they ask. And she can't say no, in part because she's going to be paid a lot of money, and in part because she just wants to go on one last adventure. Things get a little complicated after that because, of course, anything that seems too good to be true usually is. But the main character gathers up her old crew and they go on this adventure to try and find this person that they're looking for. And yeah, there's a lot that happens in here. She comes across a lot of different places and creatures, including some really weird bird things, which I won't say much more about, but it's very exciting and interesting. I mean, I just love this whole book, to be honest. I have no complaints. It was just so much fun. But there are also like some darker elements and themes in here, which I also really enjoyed. And I absolutely love the main character. And I love that she is a little bit older. Like, she's already had a whole life before we meet her, and she's a really truly seasoned pirate and she knows what she's doing. And I just love that. And this crew of people that she also gathers are very interesting. They are really something. The sequel to this is actually coming out very soon. It's called The Tapestry of Fate, and I cannot wait to get my little mitts on that book because I am so excited to read it. I almost feel like this video is just a favorites video because I love so many of these books, including this next one. It's Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce. This is historical fiction. It's set in 1950, and in it we meet this school teacher and spinster who is just surviving her life. Really, she's not really living. But then one day she wakes up and decides that this small existence of hers is not enough. And she's gonna go after her lifelong dream, which is to prove the existence of this thing that she was obsessed with when she was a child, which is this golden beetle. Now, this beetle might not even exist, but if it does so on the other side of the world. So she needs to set off and try and find this thing. And she can't go alone, so she decides to recruit an assistant. And she finds a person who she thinks is perfect, and they don't actually meet until the day they're leaving. So when she meets this woman that she has chosen as her assistant, this woman is not at all what she expected, but it's too late to do anything. So off they go to the other side of the world. Not only is this an adventure about these two British women who travel to a place they've never been to before, but it's also a story about female friendship and these two women who are so different from each other coming together, and it is just such an amazing book. I love it so much. I love the characters. It's very emotional and lovely, and it's just so good. Back into the fantasy end of things, we have Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett, which is another one of my favorites. This is historical fiction fantasy, and it follows this Cambridge professor who specializes in fae and fairies, and she is going on a research trip in this book, and the research she wants to do is close to this little village, and even though she's brilliant, she's not great with people, and so she manages to offend basically everyone in this little village, which is not great. But then her rival slash friend shows up to help, which she's not happy about because she didn't invite him. He's basically invited himself, which is arguably kind of annoying, but it does actually help with the villagers because everybody loves this guy. And from there, the story is about them trying to do some research. It's mostly her doing the research, and they come into contact with fae and fairies, and eventually this leads them to go on an adventure. This book is the perfect blend of cozy and dark for me. I feel like this balances these things very well, and I just love it so much. I love the characters, and their banter is really funny, and it's just very magical. I really like the fae and fairy elements and what we get to see of that world as well. There are also 2 more books in this trilogy, which I've read and really liked, but as with most books or series, the first book is my favorite. We have a bit of a different vibe with this next one. It's Washington Black by S.E. Edugyan. This is historical fiction, and it basically follows this main character through a pretty big portion of his life. We first meet him when he is 11 years old, and he's a field slave in Barbados, who is then chosen to become his master's brother's manservant, and this brother is quite eccentric. He is a naturalist and scientist and explorer and inventor. The brother brings our main character into this world of his, of science and exploration, and he sort of brings him into this latest project of his, which is making this flying machine. And that is just the very beginning of the story, and we go all over the world in this, to the east coast of America, to the Arctic, and we basically follow the main character through all of that. I would say that when it comes to the themes, this is a slightly heavier book than some of the other ones I'm showing you today, but there are some really interesting discussions in here. I really liked following the main character through his story, and it's really a book about friendship and betrayal and freedom and what true freedom really is. I also really liked the writing in here. It felt like a very compelling read, and a lot of the settings that we got to see felt very vivid. Another one that is a bit on the heavier side of things and definitely on the darker side of things is The Devil and the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. This is a historical fiction mystery, actually, but the whole book takes place over the course of this ship voyage. So we're on a ship going from Indonesia to the Netherlands, and it's set in, I think, the 1630s, and on this ship there is a prisoner who's being transported who happens to be the best detective in the world, and he is being brought back to the Netherlands to be executed for a crime who we don't really know if he did it or not. And with him is his faithful manservant who is determined to prove this detective innocent. So they get on the ship and off they go, and the minute they are out to sea, weird things start happening on the ship. There are strange symbols that appear on the sails, livestock is being mysteriously slaughtered, and there is a concern that there is a demon on board, which is obviously troubling. How it all comes together, you kind of have to read the book to find out, but we're trying to solve a few mysteries in here, and we're trying to solve all of them before this maybe possible demon on board gets all of them. I really enjoyed this one. Obviously, the adventure part of it is more that they're on this ship that is journeying back to the Netherlands, and I feel like that is a pretty big part of the story, so that's why I'm counting it as an adventure book. But it is also very solidly a mystery. This is really good, but I will say it is a little bit dense. It's a little chunky, so just be prepared for that if you want to read this, but it's a really nice book to get immersed in. Now we're back with some more fantasy, and again, one of my all-time favorite books. It's Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, and I will never shut up about this book. I mention it all the time because I love it so much. It's basically a mix of fantasy, adventure, and horror, and the story is all about the main character who goes on this quest to save her sister, and she recruits the help of a grave witch, a former knight, and a fairy godmother to help her. And there is also a chicken possessed by a demon, kind of helping, I guess. You all know that I'm obsessed with this chicken. I just think it's so funny. And I do think that the chicken gives you a good idea of the vibe and the style of this book. Because even though this book is kind of dark sometimes, there's also a lot of humor to the writing. Which I know is not for everyone, but it really works for me and it makes me laugh so much. I could go on and on about this book, but I talk about this book all the time and we have a lot of other books to get through, but I really recommend this one. It's the perfect mix of adventure, magic, humor, and darkness. The next one is a little bit on the lighter side again. It's the Antiquity affair, and this is historical fiction. It's set in the early 1900s, and we meet the two daughters of this esteemed archaeologist. And these sisters are quite different from each other. One is ready to make her debut as a Manhattan socialite, and the other is more non-conformist and wants to follow in her father's footsteps. Things get a little bit complicated though when this secret society that is looking for a legendary lost relic kidnaps one of the daughters and sets her on a ship away from New York. And the story is basically all about these people trying to find this girl and also trying to find this lost relic before it falls into the wrong hands. This is again the kind of book that is just fun to read. It's a little convenient sometimes, a little ridiculous sometimes, but I feel like it actually suits the story very well. And I love the fact that this has two sisters at the center of the story. Then we have a book that came out last year, and I know not everyone loved this one, but I really did. It's Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. And this is actually my favorite book by this author, which does make a lot of sense to me because I love dark academia, I love adventure books, and I kind of love books set in hell. Even though I haven't read a lot of them, I just think it's an interesting setting. The hell that we see in here is the perfect backdrop for the story. In here we follow this Cambridge student who studies magic, and she has sacrificed everything for her academic career. It's everything to her. And she has always wanted to work with this esteemed and amazing magician slash professor, and she finally gets there, and then the guy dies, which is obviously very troubling. And she decides that the only way that she can progress her career and her life is to get him back. So she decides to go to hell to find this professor, which is already quite the choice. But then she also ends up being joined by her rival, academic rival, who has come to the same conclusion. He also needs this guy back, and so they traveled hell together to find this guy. If that sounds a little absurd, it's because it is, and that's actually one of the reasons I loved this book so much, because a part of the book is trying to get to the root of why they have made this pretty insane decision. And through their journey through hell, we also go back in time and see their backstories and we learn more about them. And I just thought it was amazing. It is so bizarre, but it's also so good. And it's actually, even though it's an adventure, it's quite a character-driven novel, and I love character-driven novels. So this was just like the perfect mix of everything for me. Speaking of slightly absurd books, we also have The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, which is fantasy adventure, and I guess technically it's also historical fiction. It's sort of set in an alternate version of our world. And if you don't like dark books, and if you don't like your adventures to have a lot of violence in them, this is not the one. I don't mind that so much though, and I actually really enjoyed this one. I guess saying enjoyed is a little, well, I don't know. I got really sucked into this book, at least. It basically follows a crew of criminals who are trying to transport this princess to another land. And these people, like there's all kinds of different people in this crew. There is magic in this world, so some of them can do magic. There are different creatures, and they come across a lot of obstacles trying to do this thing. The crew is really what did it for me in here, because we have such a weird mix of characters and we meet a lot of different things in here. We have like elves, necromancers, knights, and werewolves, and it's a lot, and it is definitely a very bloody book, but I thought it was a very exciting read. The tone I can see is not for everyone, maybe because it has a slightly like humorous tone, and I think for some readers that can be a little much, but I really liked it. Then we have a book that I read very recently. It's Brigands and Breadknives by Travis Baldree, and this is actually the sequel to Legends and Lattes, and follows, like, the main character is a character that we meet in the prequel. So I don't know if you could really read this without reading the other books. I feel like maybe it would be fine. You would miss some things, but the adventure you could still really enjoy, I think. But you should also read the other books because they're really good. Anyways, out of the 3 books in the series, this is definitely the one that is the most adventurous. It has a slightly different vibe than the other books, but it's still pretty cozy, I would say. It follows a Ratkin bookseller who basically moves to a new town to start over because she feels like she really needs it, but then she gets there and it's not exactly what she had expected, and she's wondering if this is really where her future should be, and she's really stressed about it. So one night she gets really drunk and she falls asleep in this cart, and when she wakes up, this cart is pretty far away from where she's opened this bookshop and she's supposed to be living, and so she sort of accidentally goes on an adventure. I thought this was a great blend of adventure and coziness. It's maybe not as cozy as the other 2 books because it feels a little bit higher stakes sometimes, and it probably is a little bit higher stakes, but it still has like a cozy vibe to it, so I feel like it still fits very clearly into the cozy fantasy genre. I also just really love this bookseller that we're following because she's quite a character and you sort of can't help but love her. We have another quest in this next one. It's Greenteeth by Molly O'Neill, which again I feel like sort of falls into that cozy fantasy side of things, but it has some darker elements to it. It's also historical fiction, and it basically follows this lake monster who lives in this lake, and one day she meets a witch because the witch is thrown into the lake, and the monster decides that she's not going to eat this one. She's going to save her, and through that they sort of, I guess, become friends eventually. They get to know each other, and it turns out that a malevolent force is taking over the village, and this monster and the witch need to band together and go on this quest to save everyone. This is a really great blend of fae, fairies, and friendship, and I really liked reading about this quest that they go on. This has some definite like fairy tale vibes, and I really liked the atmosphere and how everything was brought to life. Back to our world though, and more into that sort of mystery leaning adventure, we have Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. And this is actually one of my all-time favorite books. I know this author is not for everyone, but I actually really like this series. At least like the first 3, 4 books, they've lost me a little bit in like recent books, but the first books in the series I really like because even though they are mysteries, there is also a very solid adventure vibe to these books, and I guess it's sort of like a quest, but in real life. It follows Robert Langdon, who is a Harvard professor of symbology, who gets called to Rome to help with the resurgence of this powerful secret society. And there's a lot going on because the Vatican, they're trying to pick a new pope, and there's also a bomb that's going to go off at midnight. So it's all very stressful, kind of, but it's also very interesting. I do think that in order to like and enjoy these books, you kind of just have to take them for what they are. They're not always like 100% accurate, but I do think there are some interesting historical and religious stuff in here, and I just really enjoy them. They're very exciting. I also maintain that in this in particular, the ending of this, there's like a little twist at the end. Well, I mean, it's not little, it's a pretty big twist. That whole thing, I think, is really well done. Then I have these 3 books, which I wanted to briefly mention because even though what I really like is like adventure books for adults, like that's what I'm really looking for, I really liked these even though they are technically meant for a slightly younger audience. So we have A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, which is a YA book, but when I read this, it didn't feel very YA. This is set in a fantasy world where we have several versions of London. So we have White London, Red London, Grey London, and then there used to be a Black London. And in some of the Londons we have magic, and in some we don't. And we follow a main character who is one of the very few people who can travel between the Londons. And he works as a sort of diplomat, but he also has a side hustle where he's a smuggler, and this smuggling thing gets him in some trouble. I also wanted to mention Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, which I'm sure you've heard of, and I kind of forget that this book is also an adventure book. And it's actually one of the first adventure books that I ever read, and it is absolutely insane. But it's well worth the read, even as an adult. I of course also have to mention Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulsen, which is a book I will squeeze into any video that I can because I love this book. This is a graphic novel, and it basically follows this little adventure that this garlic person goes on because she has to confront a vampire that moves into the neighborhood. This is, I think, middle grade, but it's very sweet, and I always say if you have a bad day and you want to read something that will cheer you up, this is the one. Then at the very end, I wanted to throw in a few non-fiction books that fit very solidly into the adventure genre. I know not all of you like reading nonfiction, but some of you do. So very quickly, we have Over the Edge of the World by Laurence Bergreen. This is all about the first circumnavigation of the globe, which happened in the 16th century. This is actually one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. We have The Lost City of Zed by David Grann, which is a history book and a biography about a man who in 1925 went into the Amazon in search of this lost city, and he was never seen again. And this is a case and a mystery that has interested a lot of people, so this book is all about that. Then lastly, Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer, which is all about the climbing season on Mount Everest in 1996, which happened to be one of the deadliest seasons on that mountain. A lot of people died, and the author of this actually climbed the mountain that year. He made it all the way up and then down and survived, and the story is all about him and everything that happened on the mountain that year. Even if you don't read a lot of nonfiction, I do think you might be interested in these. Like, Over the Edge of the World is one of the first nonfiction books that I ever read, and I read it specifically because I love adventure books so much, and it's one of the books that actually got me into reading nonfiction. And I do think that even though these are not fictional and it's not quite the same experience as reading a fiction book, these kinds of adventure books can scratch like a similar itch if you're really into these kinds of books like I am. Anyways, that was my whole stack of books that I had to show you. Now, I would love to know what your favorite adventure book is. If you have any recommendations, please leave them in the comments because I'm always looking for more books like this, and then everyone else can also get more recommendations from the comments. That was kind of it for today though. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!